The night shift at Waverly Hills. It was the fall of 2002 when Alex took a job as a security guard at the old abandoned Waverly Hills Sanatorium in Louisville, Kentucky. The hospital had once housed thousands of patients during the tuberculosis outbreak in the early 20th century, and many never left. Alex had heard the stories about the ghostly figures, unexplained sounds, and the infamous death tunnel where bodies were discreetly moved. But he didn't believe in ghosts, and the pay was decent. His first few shifts were uneventful. The sprawling, decaying hospital was dark and cold, but there were no signs of intruders or squatters. He often wandered the halls, checking to make sure no thrill-seeking kids had broken in. One night, as Alex made his rounds on the 4th floor, he felt an unusual chill. The hallway ahead was pitch black, and as his flashlight swept across the peeling walls, he thought he saw movement. He paused, focusing the light in one direction. That's when he saw it. A shadowy figure at the end of the hall, just standing there. Alex called out, thinking it was a trespasser. "Hey, you can't be in here!" The figure didn't move. His flashlight flickered. A gust of icy air brushed past him, and suddenly the figure was gone. He shook it off as his mind playing tricks on him. But a few minutes later, as he walked toward the old surgical rooms, he heard the faint sound of coughing. The coughs were soft at first, but they grew louder and closer, echoing down the empty corridor. His heart raced as he moved toward the source of the noise, but when he arrived, there was no one there. The sound of footsteps, rapid and frantic, erupted behind him. He spun around, his light shaking in his trembling hand. That's when he saw her. A woman, gaunt and pale, dressed in an old-fashioned hospital gown, was standing just a few feet from him. Her eyes were wide and sunken, her mouth partially open as if gasping for air. She lifted a hand toward him, and for a moment he thought he heard her whisper, "Help me." Before he could react, she turned and disappeared into one of the old rooms. Terrified but determined to find out what was happening, Alex followed. As he entered the room, the temperature dropped even further. The door slammed shut behind him, and the smell of antiseptic filled the air. On the wall he saw handprints smeared in what looked like blood. But what truly horrified him was the sound, something rolling, something heavy. He turned to face the door. His flashlight died just as he saw it. A gurney, moving by itself, rolling straight toward him. He stumbled back and tripped, falling hard onto the cold tile floor. Then came the sound of something dragging across the floor. He scrambled to his feet, his eyes wide in the darkness, and felt something cold brush against his leg. It was as if invisible hands were pulling him toward the tunnel, the infamous body chute. Desperate, he fumbled for his radio and managed to call for help. Seconds later, the dragging sensation stopped. When his fellow guard arrived and turned on the lights, Alex was lying on the floor, pale and drenched in sweat. There was no sign of the gurney, no handprints on the walls, and no sign of the woman. Alex quit the next morning. Years later, he learned that the 4th floor of Waverly Hills was known as the death floor, where the most severely ill tuberculosis patients had stayed. Many had died there in agony. Their bodies moved through the chute to avoid alarming the other patients. To this day, visitors to Waverly Hills still report seeing shadowy figures, hearing disembodied coughing, and feeling an unshakable sense of dread on the 4th floor. Some even claim to have seen a woman in a hospital gown, her eyes pleading for help. Now you know, stay away from Waverly Hills.
Net.